tell you what he has done in the past. Because it will make you think what you have done till now. And then I will tell you what he is doing now. So you can think about your future. So far he has built a huge VC fund, 2 global non-profit organizations, 3 big companies, and an art gallery. Right? He has managed $150 million philanthropic fund from Google. He has already built a $1 billion business unit of eBay Europe. He has also developed a lot of frontier technology for Mozilla. That's a huge deal because they started internet in the 90s. And now what he's doing? He's a venture partner at Bold Capital, manages $250 million fund with Mr. Peter Diamandis, with Sayuri. He and his wife at the back, they are co-founders of an advisory firm called Be Radical. I think Pascal will do justice to explain more about Be Radical. He is also the co-founder at the Coaching Institute, right? Specializing in ladies. You coach the ladies, right?
Jane is the founder.
Jane is the founder of the ladies.
She is the mastermind.
Oh, great. I would love to teach ladies too. Thanks. And on top of all, he is a chair of Singularity University of Entrepreneurship and Open Innovation. And Piyush Bhai will explain more about that. Come Piyush.
Thank you, Raju. So, guys, I just wanted to bring it to your notice, Singularity University is doing amazing job nowadays, especially educating business owners about how technology is rapidly changing around us and within our businesses also. And I just met Pascal in the day and we were just talking about it. So Peter Diamandis, with whom he is working, he started this university and there was, last year if you remember, there was an email from EO. There was a university happening in San Francisco with Singularity for a day. So he was the chair, the complete day chair, he planned the complete event over there for EO. And since we have him here now in Indore, it is a great opportunity for us to learn how things are shaping up in the technology world. And how many of us believe that technology is really going to change our businesses? Can I see a raise of hands? How many of us believe? Okay, so we are in the right spot and Pascal is here just for that. And we might not even be knowing at the pace that the technology is also changing in itself. So this is what he's going to educate us about. And since we are all entrepreneurs and I had requested him to give us some takeaway values in terms of what we can go back in our businesses and implement as far as the technology part in our businesses is concerned, looking at the future ahead, because we don't know at what pace the technology is coming in and it is going to hit us really hard, and if we are caught unaware, God help us. So over to you, Pascal.
Just one more thing. You guys have 2 minutes to ask for any drink or food because there won't be any service while the session is on. Cool? Okay.
Fantastic, thank you.
Cheers.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for hosting me and being such generous guests, hosts to us. And it's beautiful that we have a relatively small group, so we can have real privileged conversation. So my invitation for you is, let's keep this super interactive. Like, this is a small group, so there's something like you want to talk about, like questions, anything, just shout at me. I tend to speak relatively fast. Should I speak too fast or you didn't catch my accent? I was born in Germany, so my accent is a little off. Take one of your water bottles and start throwing at me. Okay, so let me quickly do one check here. Do you need the audio for the video, or are you recording from the microphone? Are you recording from the microphone on the camera?
So we are recording from the
from this? Okay. Can you turn this down, because I speak relatively loud and I think you can just hear me this way, right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So let's do this. Let me take you on a journey. And probably the most important thing, by the way, if you're sitting, you want to see the slides, like my magic is in the slides. So if you are forgetting the first question, I haven't even started, my friend.
So because you talked about slides, so can we have these slides
Yes.
later on?
Yes. So you will get tonight, I will send you a PDF version of the slides. We will send them to the chapter so that you can all have them. Of course, absolutely. Good question. Thank you. So if you're forgetting everything I say today, which is perfectly fine, I get it. Like it's it's late in the week and it's late in the day. Keep one thing in mind. Please keep one thing in mind, and that is that tomorrow will look dramatically different than today. And when we say tomorrow, we mean tomorrow in 24 hours. I'm going to show you how this looks like. But before we get to the future, and we will spend the whole night talking about the future, I want to talk about the past. And the past you need to talk about because the past is the only reference point you have. It's the only thing we know. And we make the same mistakes when we look at the past. I come to call this the real soon now fallacy. And the way this works is a little bit like this. In 2013, 6 years ago, I used to work at Google. And when I was at Google, we released at Google this product. Quick show of hands. You know what this is? Of course, right? It's Google Glass. This is a picture of my parents. This is literally my mom and my dad. So now you are like part of the family. And so I used to be, when I was at Google, I was part of what they call the beta programs, right? A very early version of Google Glass. And I was giving it to people and made them experience it, like my parents. And if you know anything about Google Glass, if you read the news articles or something, you know that Google Glass was a flawed product. It had a couple mistakes in it. One was, it was really expensive. The battery life was terrible. So the battery lasted only about 2.5 hours or so. And the features were pretty mediocre. The worst thing is, as my parents will tell you, when you put on Google Glass, you look like a complete idiot. So it's very easy to look at this and dismiss it. Right? Briefly after I took this picture of my parents, this picture made the rounds in Silicon Valley. These are 3 of the most powerful Silicon Valley investors. The guy on the left is Mark Andreessen. He invented the web browser. It runs now probably the best VC firm we have in Silicon Valley. When we saw this picture, we officially started calling people who wear Google Glass holes. Right? So again, it's very easy to look at the technology in its infancy and kind of dismiss it. Right? Because it's stupid, it doesn't really work, all this kind of stuff. But then something interesting happens because technology evolves and it changes more rapidly than you think. In 2018, 5 years after I was at Google and we released Google Glass, our friends over the border in China roll out this product. This is a Google Glass-like device. It's not Google Glass. But what it does is it does facial recognition. So I look at you and within 100 milliseconds, which is 1/10 of 1 second, it compares your face to a database of 100,000 wanted criminals and gives me a visual cue if you're one of those. The Chinese rolled this out in 2018 at Chinese New Year to 18,000 of their police officers at border patrol stations, airports, train stations, etc. That weekend, they catch 26 of those people. It's really fascinating because you look at this, you compare it to Google Glass, it doesn't look that different. You look at the product, it doesn't look that different. Of course, the optics are a little bit better, the processor's a little bit better. What has changed in the back end is AI. So it's very easy, and keep this in mind, it's very easy for us to look at the technology and in its infancy dismiss it. Here's an interesting example. What you're seeing here is, this is US data. The data is consistent around the world. This is the internet usage on a mobile phone device. The red line is mobile phones, the blue is PCs and laptops, and the white line is all other connected devices. Now here's an interesting question for you. If I would have shown you only the data, if you lived in the year 2008, and you would have seen only the data for the year 2008, who would have thought in this room, and I want to do a quick show of hands, who would have thought that mobile phones are going to change everything, literally everything? 2008. Anyone? 2009? 2010? So again, just looking at the data. 2011? Still nobody? 2012? Okay, some, good. 2013, keep up your hand for just 1 second. 2013, 2014? Okay, so now we are roughly at the midway point. By the way, so this is pretty new data. I've been doing this in India on our Whirlwind EO chapter tour. And 2014 is a pretty consistent number for the groups. Now here's the interesting thing. If you would have said 2014, by the way, half of you didn't even say 2014, right? Half of you said like later, 2015, 16, and so on. If you would have said 2014, you would have missed a lot of revolutions. Because you would have missed Airbnb, which was founded in 2008. You would have missed Uber, founded in 2009. You would have missed WhatsApp, founded in 2009. You would have missed Instagram, 2010. And it's not just these American companies, it's Indian companies as well. Flipkart, 2007. Paytm, 2010. Ola Taxi, 2010. And it goes on and on and on. So you would have missed all these new trends, not just by a short amount of time. You would have missed them by literally 4 years. Right? That's the interesting thing about technology. So what I'm going to teach you is how to see these trends. We call this weak signals. And everything you need to know, literally everything you need to know, I can put into a single slide. And it looks like this. This is what we call the not we actually, everybody calls it, the exponential curve, right? Like this is exponential growth, this is a doubling every time period. 1, 2, 4, 8, 16. When you draw it, it creates what we call the hockey stick. The interesting thing about this curve is this. Technology moves on this curve. But the interesting thing about this curve is the following. If you stand where this gentleman stands, somewhere there, and you look to the past, and remember the past is the only point of reference we have. You look to the past looks really flat and linear, right? There's not much happening. If you have the ability to look to the future looks really dramatically different. There's a book Ernest Hemingway wrote called The Sun Also Rises. In this book he has a quote. The full quote, which we now call the Hemingway Law of Motion. The full quote goes like this. How did you go bankrupt? Bill asks. 2 ways. Will respond gradually and then suddenly. So no, please don't go bankrupt, neither gradually nor suddenly. But keep in mind, this is how technology moves. It moves really, really slowly and then suddenly it seems to become overnight. It changes everything. I show you in a second how this looks like. But here's the challenge for us as humans. Albert Allen Bartlett, who taught these exponential trends at UC Boulder, once said that the greatest shortcoming of the human race is our inability to understand the exponential function. What he means by this is very simple. We make sense of this world in a linear fashion. The way we see the world, the way we perceive the world is linear. The day has 24 hours. The seasons come and go. It's like a very linear cadence. We're really good at linears. And I want to give you an example for this. And you're not allowed to participate. You know this. Imagine you take 30 linear steps, one step after the other. Right? How far do you get in like meters? Roughly? 30 meters? Yeah. 35 meters? Yeah. So it's 30 meters, right? Like one step after the other, you do 30 meters. So you can do the math, it's easy. But also, and this is more important, if we were to go out on the parking lot and I would say, can you show me how far this is? You would actually have a sense for it, like you have a gut feeling for it, right? Now imagine you take 30 exponential steps. Every step is twice as far as your last. So you go from, your first step is 1 meter, and then your second step is 2, and then 4 and 8c, and so on. So you do this 30 times, how far do you get?
2 to the power 30.
What's that?
2 to the power 30.
2 to the power of 29, that's correct. 29, yeah. So now, good. Okay, so that's the formula. That's good. So if you can do the math will tell you it's 1 billion meters. But here's the important thing. How far is 1 billion meters? How far does it feel? It's really hard, right? It's 1 billion meters. We have no concepts for this stuff. 1 billion meters is 25 times around planet Earth. It's from here, and let's celebrate the fact that India is going to the moon, which I love. It's amazing. Congratulations. I can't wait for you to land this thing on the moon. All the way to the moon, back from the moon, halfway to the moon again. It demonstrates 2 important things. One is you go from 30 to 1 billion, that's like the pure math behind it. But more importantly, you can't feel it. And that is what helps us back. And I'll show you in a second why this matters. Now here's the challenge. It goes the other way as well. If I show you a flock of sheep, or a bunch of dogs, or cows, or whatever, you can tell me if it's 10, 100, or 1,000. You can't tell me if it's 86 or 87 without counting. We're blind both ways. We can't see the macro and we can't see the micro, and we're stuck. So here's how this looks like as of today. Let's start with compute, because this is where everything started, computers. There's a thing called Moore's Law. Moore's law says, Gordon Moore, co-founder of Intel, said 50 years ago, said that he observed that humans push progress at a rate which means that we double the number of transistors on an integrated circuit every 2 years. This means at the same price point, computers get twice as fast. Ray Kurzweil, our co-founder, was interested in a different question. He said, okay, we know Moore's law is true for 50 years, but Moore's law is specific to transistors. He said, how stable are these trends over really long periods of time? So he looked at a slightly different number. He said, how many calculations can I perform per 1 second per 1,000 constant dollars? And then he looked at data for the last 120 years. And what he found is that for the last 120 years, this is a logarithmic chart, which is the reason why you see it as a linear line. For the last 120 years, we have moved on a perfect exponential curve in terms of our ability to do calculations per second per $1,000. Now and we keep updating this, by the way, like every single year since Ray did this. The first time Ray did this is about 20 years ago. Keep updating it, and every single year it just moves and moves and moves and moves, which is incredible. Now the reason why this is fascinating is this. You can take this graph, we know it's 120 years in the making, and you can reasonably extrapolate it into the future, and you can predict the future. You can now tell me the time, the point in time, when you have a $1,000 compute device, an iPhone or a Samsung phone or a laptop, which has the raw compute power of a human brain. Not the intelligence, the raw compute power. And that happens in 10 years. In 10 years, you will go in a store, you buy a Samsung phone or an iPhone, and it will have the raw compute power of a human brain. And remember, we're doubling, right? Every 2 years. So you go from 1 brain to 2, and then on and on and on and on. And roughly by 2050, 2060, it gets a little bit more nebulous when you get into the future, you will have 7.4 billion brains in a single $1,000 compute device. All of mankind's combined brain power literally at your fingertips. Tomorrow will look dramatically different than today. Let me show you. So one of the main use cases for compute at the moment, of course, is artificial intelligence. This is data from a group called OpenAI. It's a research think tank out of Silicon Valley. They looked at the computational power. What can AI actually do over the last 7 years? So 2012 to 2019, beginning of 2019. Again, this is a logarithmic plot. What they found is it moves on a perfect exponential. What they also found, and this is staggering, in those 7 years, 7 years is no time whatsoever. In those 7 years, AI has become 300,000 times as good as it was just 7 years ago. And it is currently doubling every 270 days. Less than 1 year for another doubling. And then remember, we go from 300,000 to 600,000 and 1.2 and so on. AI will be everywhere. Everywhere. The easiest way to think about AI is if you think about electricity. And you know, way back when we started to electrify the world, everything gets better with electricity, right? You have a machine which was used by manpower, or like a donkey or something. You put electricity in it, it gets better. AI is the same thing. We will put AI into everything, just because it makes stuff better. There's an example. There's an ancient board game called Go. Go is the most complex board games humans have ever invented. The number of moves in the game exceeds the atoms in the universe. It's orders of magnitude more complex to play than chess. This was, for a long time, we thought computers can't play this, because it's really hard for computers to do all these calculations. So we built an AI using something called a neural net. A neural net is basically a way to program an AI, more similar to like a child, how a child learns and thinks, which is, you teach an AI, like the way a child learns is you say, let's say for example, a child touches a hot surface, like an oven, and it burns its fingers. It creates a neural connection which says, hot oven, touching, burning my fingers. Now it will do this again, potentially, and then the connection gets stronger. And they do it the third time, the connection is so strong that the child will never touch a hot oven again. And neural nets work the same way. I teach a neural net by showing it results. And then over time it learns and gets these stronger connections. So Google programs an AI which plays the game of Go. they train the AI by playing the game of Go for more than 9 months against a human player. So it plays basically on end against a human player. They call this thing AlphaGo. And then they compete with the world champion. And they win against the world champion 4 out of 5 games. And this was like revolutionary. But then Google does something really crazy. They make a copy of this AI, and the copy doesn't know anything. So they remove all the training, basically, all the knowledge the AI has. So now you have an AI which can play Go, which was being trained. And you have an AI which has no idea what the game of Go is even about. And now you let them play against each other. And within 2 weeks, they play 10 million games of Go. Because of course, they're computers, right? They move very fast. So within 2 weeks, they play 10 million games of Go. The new version of AlphaGo, the one which didn't know how the game of Go even works 2 weeks ago, wins against the human 5 out of 5 games. That's what we're doing with AI. Now here's where it gets really interesting. I know that you run hospitals. This is incredible. This is melanoma, skin cancer. The way you detect melanoma is you have a dermatologist who is trained. They use a special lens, and they look at like a mole or something and make a guess if this is melanoma or not. Or skin cancer, they cut it out and then they basically do a biopsy on it. We train an AI on melanoma. So we basically take a phone, literally a phone, hold it against skin cancer or non-skin cancer cells and start to train it. We say this is skin cancer, this is not. The end result is that the AI outperforms humans in 136 out of 157 cases. These are highly trained dermatologists. So in the future, you actually, when I come into your hospital, no offense, but when I come into your hospital, I will say, you know what? Can you please put the doctor away? Can you just pull out your phone, please? Because it's better. The quality is better than what the doctor can do. Now think about what this means for rural populations, right? You don't need doctors anymore. You just send them a phone or an app, actually. So here's a crazy one. Every single picture you see in the middle of that picture frame was designed, created, and drawn by an AI. No humans. So what you do is you feed existing art into an AI. So you show the computer all the art that exists in the world. Like you say, here's all the pictures from the Louvre, and here's all the, the great works, the Indian great works, and it comes up with this new stuff, which is crazy because we thought creativity is a human endeavor. But AI starts to do this. Let's talk another area, energy. Energy is super fascinating. So we have never seen a drop, this price drop as steep as we're currently seeing in renewable energy. Just focus on the yellow line, which is solar photovoltaic. This is utility scale solar. It is now down, on average, around the world to 10 cents a kilowatt hour, 10 US dollar cents a kilowatt hour. That's cheaper than any other price of energy. Every single other form of energy is more expensive than solar energy. Now, there's 30 countries around the world where solar is cheaper than any other form of energy, including coal and nuclear, etc. Including India, by the way. You guys are building massive, massive solar panel displays. Like these big, big, big utility scale facilities. And solar is fascinating because if you just think about the disruption this holds, 2 things. First of all, the countries with the most sunshine hours are currently the poorest countries in the world. Right? Like Africa, etc. That might change. The second one is, we work with a company called Innogy. It's the largest energy producer in Germany. Their CEO, super smart guy. He's on the record. He literally said this to the press in a investors call, that he thinks that in 20 years' time, Innogy will not sell you energy anymore. They will just give it to you for free. Because the production of energy is so cheap that they don't even bother measuring it. They just give it to you for free. Now they will, make no mistake, they're not a charity. They will find ways to charge you, no question. But the actual electrons themselves, they just give it to you for free. Here's a fascinating one. What you see here is this is a theoretical work. This is work from a German PhD. They calculated that if you build, in theory, a solar panel the size of what you see here, and the theory is because you would need to distribute the energy. It's hard to do. But that is everything it is needed to power the world's energy consumption as it stands today. You make a solar panel this size, put it into sub-Saharan Africa, again, theoretically, because you need to distribute the energy, that's impossible. But it gives you an idea in what kind of age we are living. Like we're living in the world of abundance. There's abundant energy available to us. Here's one which I find particularly fascinating because it goes so deep into the human nature. DNA, particular DNA sequencing. So there's two parts to DNA. Sequencing, which is reading, and then writing, which is a technology, we typically use a technology called CRISPR-Cas9. Reading is interesting for the simple reason. The first time we sequenced the human genome was 1999, which took us 7 years, was part of what is called the Human Genome Project. A massive breakthrough for mankind. A single genome cost us $2.7 billion. Like, incredibly expensive. You can do this once, and then you basically say, you tap yourself on the shoulder and you say, that's it. That price has come down significantly. The current price for sequencing a human genome, after 20 years of effort, about $1,000. Still expensive, but $1,000. You talk, now when you see these price performance curves, there's two questions you want to ask yourself. One is, where does it go? And then you ask the experts and they will tell you, sequencing a human genome in the next 5 years will go down by another factor of 10. So it will go down to about $100. And we start using this in medical now, because it's cheap enough. And then you ask, where does it really go? And I have a colleague who teaches this stuff at Singularity University. He tells you, he jokes. So we know this price will go down in about 15, 20 years probably, to pennies. It's going to be cheap, like so cheap that basically it's free, close to free. And then he jokes, and I think sometimes he's not joking. He says, every time you flush the toilet, we will sequence your genome and give you a full health report. Because the water in the toilet is more expensive than the sequencing of the genome. And then you laugh about this. You know, I was laughing about this for a long time. And then I met the people, you know, Toto? They make toilet bowls, like high-end toilet bowls. You see them sometimes in like, you know, big hotels and so on. They have a freaking prototype for this. They literally have a toilet where like you do your thing, and then you flush it, and it does a full health report. It sequences your genome. Like, it's a crazy world. So this price has come down by 85,000 times. It drops at a truly exponential rate. Now here's what you can do with this. This is a company we invested in out of Singularity University. They're called Miraculous. What they're doing is they take a blood test, simple blood draw. What they found is that there's certain types of cancer, they shed RNA into your bloodstream. So basically they develop RNA. RNA translates DNA into proteins. So there's signature RNA now in your bloodstream. What they did is, it's hard to detect. What they did is they created a bacteria. They took a bacteria, genetically modified it, so that when the RNA is present, the bacteria acts a little bit like a lock. So the key is the RNA. The RNA gets into the DNA, into the bacteria, and makes the bacteria illuminate in this blue color. What they can do with this test is, this test costs $200. Takes 20 minutes. It's a simple blood draw. They can detect, for example, stomach cancer pre-stage 1, earlier than any other test on this planet. And you know very well, of course you run cancer centers, if you detect this pre-stage 1, your chance of survival is north of 99%, right? You survive. So this is going to change, and this is not the only company doing this stuff. There's a bunch of companies doing this stuff. So this is where we're going in terms of healthcare. It's crazy. But here's the fascinating thing. This whole DNA thing has really interesting implications, which I think we have not even considered. This is a good friend of ours, Heather Dewey Harcourt. She's an artist based out of New York City. And she's interested in this whole DNA question. And I let Heather talk about this herself. Can we turn up the volume? Let me quickly start this, you want to hear the people.
We don't know yet how our DNA might be used against us in the future.
We are artists. Heather, do we have one artist in New York is making 3D models of people's faces, people that she's never met.
She calls the project Stranger Visions. The strangers are people whose genetic material she finds in the sidewalks and subways of New York City.
How much can I actually find out about you, something that you accidentally leave behind?
So let me unpack this. It's a little strange. So what Heather is doing,
she's literally picking up cigarette butts on the streets of New York. On a cigarette butt is your saliva. In your saliva is your DNA. She extracts the DNA using a technique the FBI has mastered like 30 years, 40 years ago. She then takes that DNA, runs it through the $1,000 sequencing, sends it off to an advanced genetics testing lab, reconstructs your facial features out of your DNA, because of course your facial features are encoded in your DNA, right? The shape of your skull, color of your skin, color of your hair, and so on. Even your age is somewhat encoded in your DNA because you can look at what is called the degradation of DNA, so it kind of degrades over time. She then puts all of this into a 3D model and then 3D prints these masks of people she has never seen before. Now, the fascinating thing about this video is this. This video is actually old. It's about 3 years old. This is and I use this video a lot. We do a lot of work with government. So we talk to government officials, a lot of prime ministers I've met over the time. And we show them this for a simple reason. A, we want to make them aware. So they, of course they have no clue what's happening here, which is fine. It's not their job, right? But the more important thing is, to the very best of my knowledge, there's not a single jurisdiction in the world where this is currently illegal. I looked this up, it's perfectly legal to do this in India. So, if you think about this, like the plastic bottles you're currently drinking out, I would wipe them down with a little bit of bleach afterwards. Just saying, right? Or think about this. There's a lot of diseases which are encoded in your DNA. Like there's single genome diseases which are encoded in your DNA. Huntington's disease, for example. As well as you can determine how likely you are to get a certain disease, certain diseases, by looking at your DNA. So next time you're with your health insurance or life insurance broker, and they offer you a cup of, like, say, chai tea, I suggest you don't take it. They might call you afterwards and have like weird questions, you know, like, Pascal, we did this like little thing, and like, we need to talk about your insurance rates. It's a crazy world. The change we're seeing in the next 100 years literally equals the change we've seen in the last 20,000 years. Question?
How close was the
Oh yeah,
3D thing to the real?
totally. So the question is, how close is the rendering to a real face?
Yeah.
I can tell you, it is. Have you ever seen a police sketch? You know, like one of these like black and white police sketches.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like this. So I've seen, she's done experiments where she took DNA from someone she knows, like let's say your DNA, and runs it through it. When you look at the faces, it looks a little bit like, you kind of like, if you squint, you're like, yeah, it is kind of like the person, it's not really, right?
Okay.
So there's, of course, she has information which is not in your DNA. Like, how do you cut your hair? Did you fall as a kid and you broke your nose and your nose is, you know, crooked?
Okay.
Like, she doesn't know that, of course, it's not in your DNA. But it's close enough to like, kind of like, when you squint at it, you're like, yeah, it's kind of me, right? So, again, the change we're seeing in the next 100 years equals the change we've seen in the last 20,000 years. With that, I want to talk about this notion of disruption. Now, disruption is a topic I find particularly fascinating for a simple reason, and I find the word so fascinating because nobody can define it anymore. We're using it like all the time. If you read the news or like you talk to management consultants particularly, they love to use the word because it puts the fear of God into your heads, and like you throw money at them because, you know, like you feel like, oh my God, we're getting disrupted. Here's the challenge with disruption. For me, disruption is like tofu. If you're a vegetarian, ever eaten tofu? Tofu tastes like nothing. And then you put sauce on it, it tastes like the sauce. Right? Disruption is the same thing. There's no meaning behind it anymore. So I think you need to start with actually defining what is disruption as a word. And here's the best we can come up with. There's a difference between innovation and disruption. And you need both. And it's interesting because people already use those two words interchangeably, which they are not. Innovation is if you make the same things just better. So innovation is like, say you're in the washing powder industry. You make washing powder, your next version of washing powder is, you know, like, let's say it's Tide by Procter & Gamble. Your next version of washing powder is Tide Super, and then it becomes Tide Ultra and Ultra White and so on. And that's okay, because the market demands this. The market comes to you every year and says, what's new? Right? And you say, here's a new version. Every once in a while you make something new. Let's say you're not making washing powder, you make washing liquid. It's not disruptive yet. It becomes disruptive when you make something new, which makes the old thing obsolete. Let's say I invent a washing machine which doesn't need washing powder anymore. Now I become disruptive to the washing industry, the washing powder industry. The challenge with disruption is this. You typically don't see it because it's not coming out of your industry. It's coming out of other industries. If you're in the washing powder industry, I guarantee you, you know everything about the washing powder industry. You know exactly what other people in the industry are doing. You don't know what two guys in the garage are doing, creating a washing machine which doesn't need washing powder because it uses ultrasonic waves. So with that being said, this is the only framework which we have about disruption for the last 20 plus years. This is Clayton Christensen. He wrote a book called The Innovator's Dilemma. It was released in 1997. His framework is actually really good, but it's a very singular framework. Let me show you. It works like this. There's something called the customer need line. This is like the quality a customer expects a product to deliver, or a service. And the customer need line actually doesn't change all that much over time. And then you have got an incumbent. This is an existing company, an established, old, existing company. At one point in the past, they delivered what the customer wanted, and then they start doing innovation. So they deliver a product which is better and better and better and better. So they actually over-exceed what the customer wants. And that's okay. I mean, it's a customer surplus, right? And before Clayton came, we believed that you are safe as long as your competitor, the new entrant in the market, isn't as good as you are. And what Clayton showed us is that it's not true. But Clayton showed us that when you get a new competitor, as long as they're as good as what the market needs, they become disruptive. Here's an example. When I was, I think, 14 or 15 years old, I decided to shave with one of these things. For the man in the room, if you've ever tried to do this on yourself, not by a skilled barber, you know this is the quickest way to cut yourself into little pieces. You look like literally like a zombie. It's terrible. It's clearly a product which isn't good enough. It became good enough when it became this. This is what is called the safety razor. It's a single blade razor, but it has a casing around it which allows you to shave yourself without cutting. And then the industry, once they found this, so Gillette and Wilkinson Sword, what they started doing is innovation. So what they do, they add blades. So you go from 1 blade to 2 to 3 to 7 to 80 blades. Right? So that's the future. So very clearly, this market is ripe for disruption, right? Like we are over-exceeding what the customer wants. The customer needs 1 blade, we're giving him 80. So this punk comes along and starts a new company.
Hi, I'm Mike, founder of DollarShaveClub.com. What is DollarShaveClub.com? Well, for $1 a month, we send high-quality razors right to your door. Yeah, $1. Are the blades any good? No. Our blades are great. Each razor has stainless steel blades, an alligator lubricating strip, and a pivot head. It's so gentle, a toddler can use it. And do you like spending $20 a month on brand name razors? 19 go to Roger Federer. I'm good at tennis. Stop paying for shit that you don't need. And stop forgetting to buy your blades every month. All 100 I'm going to ship them right to you. Stop forgetting to buy your blades every month and start deciding where you're going to stack all those dollar bills I'm saving you. We are DollarShaveClub.com and the party is on.
So he builds a company called Dollar Shave Club, which sells you an objectively worse product. It only has 2 blades, literally 2 blades in a market where like 5 to 7 blades was the norm. But they disrupt, they become innovative by completely changing the way you buy these things. Because you're now not going into a store and buy them. They ship them to your house. And you're not paying like $5 a blade, you pay $1 a blade. Within 3 years, they become so successful that Unilever buys them for $1 billion US. And then, you know, I saw this, and until recently, I was always thinking, man, Unilever overpaid probably, right? They were like panicking or something and overpaid. And about 4 weeks ago, I was at the National Retail Federation. It's the largest retail organization in the US. I was giving a keynote, and I met someone, and we talked about this. And I said, man, I think they overpaid. And he said, like, oh, no, you don't know. Here's what happened in the market. There's a company called Gillette. Gillette has a 70% market share in the United States for the last 40 years. Has not budged. It's like 70% flat. These guys come along, within 3 years, they take 14% market share. 14. Procter & Gamble bought Gillette about 20 years ago or so, 15 years ago. They paid nearly $50 billion to buy Gillette. In July this year, Procter & Gamble wrote off $8 billion because they think that the brand has lost so much value. It's crazy. So this is the model we have. It's a good model, but it's a little bit like a hammer. So you can only use it for certain use cases, for certain like innovation and disruption cases. So we got super interested in this. And with my team at Be Radical, Mafi and Jane, what we did is we dug really deep into the research. Because we had this aspiration to find the universal theory of disruption. Now here's the bad news, it doesn't exist. At least we couldn't find it. But what we found is, we found 3 specific factors which lead to disruption. And here's the interesting thing for you as an entrepreneur, from my perspective. When you know them, you know how to protect yourself. But also, when you know them, you know how to disrupt others, because they become attack vectors, right? This is how you build companies. So I want to share them with you. And I want to talk about this company. And I want to talk about Nokia for a simple reason. Because everybody who talks about disruption talks about, at least in the US, we talk about 3 companies. Nokia is one of them. And we talk about these companies as if they would be like idiots, you know, like morons. You get an idea who the other 2 are? Yes?
BlackBerry, Kodak.
Who's that?
Kodak.
Kodak.
And BlackBerry.
BlackBerry, it's interesting, in India everybody says BlackBerry. So in the US we have Blockbuster, which was this video rental store. BlackBerry is another good example, so probably have 4 actually. Kodak is fascinating. We use Kodak now as a verb. We go to people and say, you got Kodak! And here's the thing. I know lots of people at Nokia, and they're smart people, so clearly they're not morons, right? So we got interested in this. And at Singularity, I had the great pleasure of meeting a lot of Nokia executives, former Nokia executives. Wow, that's not me. I love the fact that they say a fire alarm has been reported, but they basically say like, FYI, just sit there, sit around. You don't need to leave the building, just so you know. It's your choice if you want to burn to death or you want to go out. Okay, this is the first. Okay, so that's amazing. You're absolutely fearless. I love that. You're like, this fire alarm, who cares? Let them burn. Okay, let me quickly see what the situation looks like if we are briefly evacuating, taking a break. What do you think? We just go through it?
He's just going to check you.
Okay, perfect. All right. So let me tell you more about Nokia. Talking about buildings burning to the ground.
Yeah.
So Nokia. I got to talk to a lot of people at Nokia. So we started stitching it together. We started understanding what happened. And here's the story of Nokia and the learnings from it. And the learnings apply, you will see in a minute, apply to every industry. Regardless if you are, like, consider yourself in tech or not. This is innovation. Nokia builds the phone on the left, and then they make a new version of that phone over and over again, and it becomes a little bit smaller, the battery life gets better, the voice quality gets better, so it's classic innovation. In March 2007, I buy this device. This was the pinnacle of this thing. This is the Himalaya of the Nokia. N95.
Yes.
I freaking bought this thing, cost me $400. It was amazing. Tiny, 2 cameras, you can take a selfie with it. The selfie was about this size. You could pretend that it has the internet on it. Not really, but it looked like it. It had 2 weeks of battery life. Hello iPhone, 2 weeks. This is March. And then in June, this happens. And I go to the Nokia guy and I'm like, how do you go from this to this? Like, it makes no sense to me. And the Nokia person, I spoke to the senior vice president for devices back in the day. And he looks at me and says, Pascal, you make the same mistake as every other person I know. You all say this is one thing. You say the smartphone disrupted Nokia. But the smartphone is not the smartphone. The smartphone is all of this. It's a bunch of components. It's a different type of screen, like touch screens. It's a different type of processor, much more powerful. It's a different type of form factor, much bigger and longer. It's a different type of sensors, different type of operating system. And then I spoke to the person at Nokia who's responsible for the screen. I found the person who's responsible for the screen. I said, didn't you see this coming? Were you blind? And he said, no, Pascal, we have the exact same prototype as Apple had on our desk. The same screens. And I spoke to the person who's responsible for the main processor, the CPU. I said, didn't you see this? And they said, of course. And then I spoke to the person at Symbian, which was the operating system. I said, didn't you see this? And he said, of course we do this. What they couldn't do is, and this is where disruption comes from, they couldn't put it together. Because disruption is not a single feature. You will, in none of your businesses, you will ever get disrupted by AI, the blockchain, or any other technology. You get disrupted by someone who can put this stuff together in new packages. And that is a very different skill. It's a skill you need to actually learn and prepare for. Number one. Number two is this. This gentleman here is Steve Ballmer, CEO of Microsoft at the time. This is filmed about a week or two after the iPhone got introduced. And they asked Bill, remember Bill, well, Microsoft had an operating system, a mobile phone operating system, Windows Mobile. And they asked Bill what he thinks about the iPhone, and this is his answer.
Let me ask you about if I may. Zoom is getting some traction, and Steve Jobs goes to Macworld and he pulls out this iPhone. What was your first reaction when you saw it?
$500 fully subsidized with the plan. I said, that is the most expensive phone in the world, and it doesn't appeal to business customers because it doesn't have a keyboard, which makes it not a very good machine.
So if you're laughing about this, this was exactly my reaction, right? I mean, the guy's a little goofy, and so I watch this and I'm laughing. And then I think, wait a second. This is, sorry, it's not Bill, of course, it's Steve, right? I mean, this is Steve Ballmer. He's clearly a smart person. He runs, at the time, the biggest company in the world by market share, by market capitalization. He surely is smarter than I am. So what is he seeing that I don't see? Like, why is he making this statement? So I go watch this thing 20 times. I literally watched this video 20 times. And then it dawns on me. I realize he's right. I mean, with hindsight, we know, of course not. But I'm like, he's completely right, because he makes the cardinal mistake of comparing the iPhone to a phone. And the iPhone is not a phone, it's a computer. Now here's the challenge. If you're Nokia, you know exactly how to make the best damn phone in the world. You're world champions at this. But you have no idea how to make a computer. Nokia would have never been disrupted by another phone company. It gets disrupted by a computer company because the existing skills and processes are no longer relevant. This breaks your neck because you have all these skills and processes in the old world, but this new thing comes along, you don't know anything. Here's a good example. This is the combustion engine in a car. It has 2,500 moving parts. Quite frankly, it's a wonder that these things don't fall apart all the time, right? I mean, you're in the car business. This is a magic device.
I was going to say that Tesla is doing the same.
Yeah, exactly. So here's the deal. I was born in Germany. There's a German company called Volkswagen. They've got 690,000 employees. It's the biggest car maker in the world, well, battling with Toyota. They have 690,000 people whose existing skills and processes are no longer relevant because an EV, an electric vehicle, has 60 moving parts in its engine, its motor. You can make those anywhere in the world with low skilled labor. You don't need these existing skills and processes. And here it gets where it gets really, really crazy. And I'm sorry to say this about the car industry. Once these things become ubiquitous, we now know that there's Teslas, and Tesla is a terrible car as a car, but we now know that there's Teslas on the road which have driven 800,000 miles without a single service. All they've done is replace the tires and the brakes and the windshield wipers, and every once in a while there's a ding in the like a scratch which you need to take out. But these things are so simple and so robust that they don't break anymore. It will change the car industry forever in really interesting ways. Here's the last one. If you've ever seen Apple introduce a product, it's like the Oscars. It's this like big thing, right?
Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone. Here it is.
So you compare this with the way you bought a phone prior. This is in Europe and the US. I don't actually know how this was in India, but you walk into the store, which is next to eye candy. I have no idea what eye candy sells. But you walk in the store, and there's this like 20-year-old, and they're pushing a phone on you because they get the subsidies from the carriers. They don't care what phone you walk out of it. They don't care if you're a happy customer. They actually don't want to see you ever again. All they care about is the subsidies from the carrier. Apple sells you for here. This is the temple, right? It's the glass and steel and wood temple. You go to the geniuses. They're really nice people. I fundamentally believe that if Apple would have sold their products in the existing sales channel, they would have not been successful. Because disruption happens typically at the go-to-market. It doesn't happen in the lab. You don't get disrupted in the lab. You get disrupted by someone bringing the product to market in a new way. Think about Dollar Shave Club. They disrupted not because they made two-blade razors, they disrupted because they changed the go-to-market. And then you combine all of this with what Scott Cook, he's the CEO of a company called Intuit Software Company in Silicon Valley. He's probably the best CEO we have in Silicon Valley. He said that success is a powerful thing because it tends to make companies do it. And that's true. I mean, think about what Apple has done. Apple is super successful, right? At one point, it was the most valuable company in the world, until relatively recently. Apple has not done anything innovative in the last 10 years. Since they rolled out the iPhone, Apple is the most boring company on the planet. All they're doing is like, here's another version of the damn iPhone, right? And here's a bunch of headphones, that's it. And you get a watch, that's all. I had an interesting interaction with, we do a lot of work at Be Radical, doing a little bit of strategy consulting and building capacity inside of typically entrepreneur-led organizations. And I, as I mentioned, I'm German, so we work with a lot of like the Mittelstand, the German family-owned businesses. And they have a really big issue. They're doing too well. I sit down with them, and I say, man, this is all happening, and you need to do something. And I say, Pascal, I literally have a CEO who came to me and said, Pascal, I have no idea what you're talking about, because our order book is full for the next 3 years. And I say, that's great for you, but I don't know what happens in year 4 and 5 and 6 and 7, right? So you need to be careful. All right. So these are the 3 factors. Disruption is not a singular feature. Your existing skills and processes are no longer relevant, and disruption happens typically at the go-to-market. The good news about everything I told you so far, and everything I will tell you, is it's all common sense. Or as someone else once said, it is really not that complicated, it's really just hard. And I think as an entrepreneur you know this, right? Like, there is no magic formula. I can't give you a magic formula. I can't give you an insight you can't find anywhere else, because it's really all common sense. I want to point out, before we move on, I want to point out one thing. We call this the 4 horsemen. So we have the great privilege to work with a lot of clients, and we see what they're struggling with. And we identified 4 main points they're struggling with as they are embarking on their innovation journey. And I just want to share them with you for a simple reason. When you know them, you can name them, and when you can name them, you can change them. First one is this: fear of cannibalization. Classic. You make something, it makes a lot of money, you know there's something new coming, it probably makes less money, so you're not doing it, because you don't want to cannibalize your core business. Which is, of course, the worst possible idea, because I guarantee you, there's someone looking at this and saying, this is amazing, I'm going to cannibalize you. This is then, by the way, the next generation EO member. Right? So this is the people you will find in your forum who are kind of like, kicked your butt, and you're really angry about them, so you want to kick them out of your forum. Number 1. Second one is this. This is super subtle, but very dangerous. It's the idea that you have existing CapEx and OpEx. You've got factories, you've got people working for you, you've got processes, you've got machines, whatever it is. So you have a tendency to use them, because you already have them. Now your competition, the new upstarts, they have none of that stuff. So they can look at a market in a very different way. You will see this later, like how this manifests itself in the world. Third one, immune system. Salim Ismail has popularized this concept. The idea of the immune system is very simple. Every company in the beginning is in exploration and innovation mode, then you get into, hopefully you find product market fit, so your product now works. And then you get ultimately into what is called protecting the status quo. You make no money in phase 1 and 2, you make all your money in phase 3. And that's fine. So you start protecting the status quo, you start to milk the cow. You now also start to hire people who are world-class status quo protectors. Right? Like a lot of people in your organization, their sole job is to protect the status quo. As this goes on, you start to calcify this. And as this goes on, then you start to build an immune system. Literally an immune system. Which not just protects you from the outside, but it protects you from the inside. And this is dangerous, because you come up, like your people come up with new ideas, and then there's these other people who squash them down. right? We're not doing this, like this is not how we're doing things here. Right? It's a classic example of this. So you need to be very aware of it, because every company has it, and you need to figure out how to overcome it. The last one is this one here. This is called the time horizon fallacy. It is an extension of work which McKinsey has done. So McKinsey has developed a model called the 3 time horizon model. They say basically there's time horizon 1, which is the here and now. Every company is good in here and now. And then far out is time horizon 3. This is research and development. And then you've got the time horizon 2, which is kind of like the in-between state. This is where you do the interesting work. Now the challenge with time horizon 2 is this. When you're in time horizon 2, let's say you have an innovation department, team, manager, and they do a time horizon 2 thing, like a thing like 2 years, 3 years, 4 years out. They typically come to the organization, and the organization applies the thinking from time horizon 1 to time horizon 2. And you apply the same metrics and key performance indicators to it. So the classic example is the people from time horizon 1, your CFO, will go to the person who comes from the innovation side and says, okay, that's great, when will it make $1 million? Or $1 million rupees, or whatever like the numbers you want to throw out. And the person in time horizon 2 says, I don't know. It's a new market. We don't know, we haven't tried this, it's new. And then the person in time horizon 1 will say, your CFO will say, then we're not going to do it. Now the people in time horizon 2 become smarter over time. So they learn, I'm a time horizon 2 person. My whole career I've spent in time horizon 2. So they start to learn to produce whatever time horizon 1 wants. So you start lying, basically. Like you give them like the PowerPoints and the Excel spreadsheets, and you say, look, we made $1 million in 5 years, you know. And so eventually you will get your project, hopefully done. But then the second thing happens, which is when time horizon 1 falls on hard times. So like the business doesn't go all that well, what they do is they start to plunder the resources from time horizon 2. They go to the innovation people and say, you're not making money, give me the resources back. And that's of course the worst thing you can do, because time horizon 1 is already sinking. Time horizon 2 is your future, and now you're pulling the resources away from the future, so you need to protect those. Those are the 4 main things we're seeing everywhere in the world. Andy Grove once said, only the paranoid survive. I think we need to have a good chunk of paranoia. Now let me make one thing very clear. Like you might listen to all of this and say, well, it doesn't affect me. Because I'm in a low-tech, no-tech business, whatever. Like I had the enormous pleasure of having lunch with a few of you, and one of you makes incense sticks. So you can say, well, incense sticks, come on, like AI will do nothing for incense sticks. Well, I would argue that even your business will be affected, because there is not a single business which is not a tech business anymore. And I'll show you now, I want to share with you our very latest research. This is literally research which we have, it's ongoing, but we've completed the first version just before we came to India. So literally, EO India is the first group to see this. It works like this, and this will affect everyone. So if you're in a consumer business, it affects you directly. If you're in a B2B business, it will affect your clients, and thus it will affect your business. For the last 40 years, we thought about markets as a pyramid structure. This is the product pyramid, where you have high margin, low volume at the top. This is your classic luxury goods, or exclusive products and services, and then you've got the exact opposite at the bottom. We typically talk about 3 types of companies. You've got the top of the pyramid, again, typically luxury goods or very individualized goods. You've got the stuff which is cheap and you get everywhere at the bottom. And then you've got the big fat middle. And the big fat middle is where most of the economic activity all around the world happens. Now here's the interesting thing. I'll show you in a minute why. We see this pyramid shifting in the most dramatic way, like something we haven't seen for 40 years. So this pyramid starts to shift into this shape. The top gets bigger. And again, the top is now not only luxury goods, the top is individual products for individual customers. The bottom gets bigger. I'll show you in a minute why this all is happening. And the middle kind of like gets pulled apart. These things turn more into what we call an hourglass shape. The middle starts to disappear. And it's pretty dramatic. So we start calling this hourglass economics. Jay Murphy and I are writing a book about this at the moment. It's going to be published by 2020. Let me show you how this looks like. We use fashion as the first indicator, because fashion is what we call the canary in the coal mine. It's a very early indicator. So in fashion, here's the first thing which happened. This is cumulative data for the United States of America for the last 5 years. The top grew 81%, the bottom grew 37%. So the top grew 81%, got huge. The bottom grow already on a large base bigger. The middle only grew 2% over the last 5 years. So if you're in the middle, you see basically no growth whatsoever. Meanwhile, your competitors are all growing, so you're getting squeezed out of the market. In the US, in 2018, 1,800 stores, fashion stores have closed. They're all what you would consider in the middle. We expect this year there's more than 10,000 fashion stores being closed in the middle.